During the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, as the motorcade traveled through Dealey Plaza, in addition to the occupants' wounds, 2 points of damage to the limousine were incurred. These impacts caused immediate physical reactions, which can be seen on the Zapruder film of the assassination, which allows the precise timing of the impacts. 2 distinct points of damage were incurred. The first was a crack in the windshield, circled in red, caused by a fragment of the bullet which passed forward through JFK's head. The second point was a dent in the chrome windshield frame, highlighted by the dark arrow. The dent in the chrome windshield frame accommodates the nose of a non-deformed 6.5mm Mannlicher Carcano bullet known to have been fired during the assassination. The force of these 2 impacts deformed the windshield and caused a flare of reflected sunlight to Zapruder's camera's lens. The first flare is seen at frame Z314, 1 frame after 313, when a bullet had passed forward through JFK's head, fragmenting, with a fragment cracking the windshield. The second flare is seen at frame Z329, which is thought to be from the direct impact of a whole bullet striking the windshield frame 1 frame earlier at Z328. These 2 immediate physical reactions are 15 frames apart. Zapruder's camera was filming at 18.5 frames per second, so the impacts are 0.8 seconds apart. The manually operated bolt-action Mannlicher Carcano rifle found on the 6th floor of the TSBD can only fire 1 shot every 2 seconds at a minimum, as the following video shows. An entire clip of 6 bullets is fired in 12 seconds without time for aiming in between. The Mannlicher Carcano rifle found on the 6th floor could not fire 2 shots, which impacted within 0.8 seconds, as the Zapruder film shows. Abraham Zapruder, who filmed the assassination from atop a pedestal on the north side of Elm Street, heard these shots and reacted to the loud gunshot reports with near immediate involuntary startle reactions. These startle reactions caused a downward movement of his hands, which caused a downward blurring of the film in response to hearing the shots. Here are 4 points on the film which have downward blurring, which must be distinguished from the blurring from numerous minor horizontal panning errors seen elsewhere on the film. The delay in his response to gunshots was based on his distance from a sniper's nest and the speed of sound, as well as the additional time for his involuntary neurological startle reactions to manifest themselves. His rapid involuntary startle reaction time can be easily calculated from the shot taken from the TSBD which struck Governor Connally at frame 223. From the Mannlicher Carcano bullet velocity, we know that this shot was fired at frame 221 to strike Connally at frame 223. The physical reaction to this bullet impact, the forward bulging of Connally's jacket, can be seen 1 frame later at frame 224, just as for the impacts at 313 and 328. There is a downward blur seen on the film at frame 227, which is 6 frames after the shot was fired from the 6th floor at frame 221. The sound of the gunshot report took 4.5 frames to reach his ears, so his involuntary startle reaction time took 1.5 frames to manifest itself. The bullet impact which caused the flare at Z329 struck 1 frame earlier at 328. At Z328, it would have taken a bullet 3 Zapruder frames to reach the limo's windshield frame, so it must have been fired from the TSBD at frame 325. Here we see the downward blurring of the film at frame 331, 6 frames after it was fired, just as for the bullet which earlier had struck Connally. Based on the speed of bullets, the speed of sound, and Zapruder's documented involuntary reaction time, we can conclude that both shots fired at Z221 and Z325 both came from the TSBD. Zapruder was not the only one who heard this gunshot. Secret Service agent Clint Hill ran to the limo and heard the final shot's impact. Here he can be seen arriving at the limo's rear bumper just over 1/2 of a second after this impact, which he described as sounding like metal on metal. We can see that the impact, flare, and blur following the frame 328 is exactly the same as for the previous shot from the TSBD. What about the flare seen at frame 314? JFK was struck in the head from behind at frame 313 with a fragment striking and cracking the windshield, and we see the flare one frame later at 314. For this shot, we see that Zapruder blurs his film at frame 318. This is 8 frames after the shot originated, unlike the shots fired from the TSBD before and after this shot, which were blurred 6 frames after the shot's origin. Zapruder's position on his pedestal was fixed, as was his involuntary startle reaction time documented at 1.5 frames. The speed of sound was fixed. The only variable is his distance from a gunshot's origin. So I can conclude that this shot arose from a greater distance than the TSBD. All shots fired from behind the motorcade approached on a right to left trajectory. Only one other building in Dealey Plaza allows that trajectory, which is the Dow Tex building. The Dow Tex building is 6 Zapruder frames acoustically distant from Zapruder's fixed position on the pedestal. The shot which cracked the windshield came too quickly before the following shot from the TSBD, and Zapruder's delayed reaction and trajectory are consistent with it being fired from the Dow Tex building. Clearly, the shots causing flares at Z314 and Z329 could not have both come from the TSBD. It should be noted that the flares are qualitatively different as well. The first smaller and shorter in duration due to only a fragment of a bullet striking and cracking the windshield, and the second being larger and longer due to the full force of a whole bullet on the windshield frame. There are 2 distinct points of damage to the limo: the crack in the windshield and the dent in the frame. There are 2 windshield flares, both 1 frame after each separate impact. Zapruder has 2 blurs in response to 2 closely spaced gunshot reports with 2 different reaction times based on the differing distance of 2 snipers' nests from Zapruder's fixed position on his pedestal. The events for the first shot from the Dow Tex building cracking the windshield is impact at 313, flare 1 Zapruder frame later at 14, and a blur 4 frames later at 318. All of these events occurring sequentially in less than 1/5 of a second. The events for the second shot from the TSBD, which struck the windshield frame, are impact at Z328, flare 1 frame later at 329, and a blur at 331, this time only 2 frames after the blur. Both of these series of events occurring sequentially in less than 1/5 of a second. Both of these exact series of events separated by 0.8 seconds and dictated by the speed of sound, the speed of bullets, distances, and Zapruder's documented involuntary reaction time. There were 2 snipers' nests behind the motorcade in the TSBD and the Dow Tex buildings. 2 shots fired from 2 locations striking within less than 1 second equals one conclusion: conspiracy.